All right, hey everybody. We're going to begin the watercolor technique activity. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you each technique that we're going to use. And I would like you to try the same on your paper. You can use different colors, of course, and whatever brush or brushes you feel most comfortable with. I'm just using what I'm using just for this example. So, as you can see, I have 8 different sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we're gonna do 8 different techniques, 1 in each section. The first one I'm gonna do is called a flat wash. And the flat wash, very simply, is you're gonna do one color and you're going to paint it as flat and evenly as possible. So in order to do that, I wanna make sure I have everything set up the right way. I'm left-handed, so I have everything on my left side. I have my paints, my paper towel, my brushes, my 2 cups of water. One for dirty water, that's where I'm gonna rinse my brush out when I'm switching colors, and then one for clean water that I dip in once my brush is clean to get fresh water, okay? It might take a little bit to get used to that, but it's a good habit to get into. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a color. I'm gonna start with red, and I'm just going to activate the paint and load up my brush with paint. I would recommend a smaller section for this. So I'm just gonna go in this small triangle, and I am just painting in a flat wash of color. Dip in the water again, get some more paint. You wanna make sure that you're always keeping the paper and the paint wet so that it blends together and creates a nice even finish, okay? You might end up seeing some brush strokes, and that's okay. We are using paint and paint brushes, so that's to be expected. But here's a flat wash. Second technique is a gradient. A gradient is talking about value, so we're actually going to go from dark to light. And I'm going to do that right down here. And I'm going to use a different color. I'm actually going to go with blue. So to start this, I'm actually going to just do the blue, full blue color up at the top, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse my brush out a little bit and dab it on the paper towel, and then go right underneath that blue for a lighter value. I'm going to just repeat that. Dip it in the water, dab it on my paper towel, go again. Water, paper towel, go again. Okay? Now, what I'm noticing is it's really dark up here and really light down here. So I want to actually kind of go back and allow this to have more of a transition so it looks a little bit more gradual. So I kind of went back up here, obviously, and just pulled it down a little bit more as we get down to the bottom, okay? So in general, we've got dark to light. That is gradient. Next one, we're gonna explore some shapes. So I'm actually gonna switch brushes here. Maybe I'll just set this one to trade places. This is called a round brush, and this came with the watercolor set. It's pretty nice. These I'd like you to explore some different colors, change it up a little bit. So I'm gonna start with green. I'll do these shapes down here. And I'm gonna start with a circle. I'm just gonna do the bold color there. I'm gonna try to do a little gradient within the shape. So I rinsed my brush out, and I'm just gonna kind of come up here and finish that shape, right? And then I come back in and pull the color up to it. So it actually ends up looking all the same. So maybe what I can do is go back in here with this color and touch it a little more. There's not as much variation in that as I wanted to, but based on the size, I'm okay with that. Next, I'm gonna do another shape. I'll do a triangle here. So I'm just gonna kind of do part of the shape. I'm gonna rinse my brush out. dry it off a little bit. I'm gonna start bringing it over, and I'm gonna rinse my brush out, dry it off. So there's a little bit of variation there. Another pretty cool way to do a shape, I'll do another circle up here. This one's gonna be kind of large, so it'll go off of it'll go beyond the tape, and that's all right. What you can do is actually, you're gonna paint on your paper first, the actual shape, and then you're gonna take your paint and fill that area with the paint and just kind of let it move around as it sits on top of the paper. So it kind of has that surface tension. But what's cool is there's a lot of variation within the paint right there. You can do some different line techniques as well. So, you know, try experiment with that a little bit. You know, if I were to push really hard and then let up my pressure, I can get it from going thick to thin, which is kind of fun. You can do some different things with that. You can pull out different areas. Maybe I want to do something over here. I'll get the yellow. Do a couple of yellow stripes over here. And then with the yellow, maybe we'll grab a little orange and just tap the stripes and let the orange kind of bleed into that a little bit, which is a pretty cool effect. You could even do shapes on top of shapes, you know, let them kind of blend in. So maybe I've got, you know, another triangle here, but I want to preserve this stuff because I know that's going to turn brown if I mix the blue and the orange together. So I'm just going to kind of go around that. So just experiment with some different shape ideas. Have some fun with it. Try different things. That's what this is all about. All right. Okay. So, all right, moving on. My next technique is going to be wet on wet. I'm going to switch back to the flat brush here, and I'm going to pick another area to use. I'm going to do right here. So wet on wet simply means that you're going to get the paper wet with just clear, clean water first. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in with clear, clean water. I want to work relatively quickly. I don't want this to dry before I apply the paint, or else it won't work. This is going to be similar to this shape up here. So let's say that I do a little green, and as soon as I touch that paint to that paper, it is going to react with the water and start moving within that space. This is a very effective technique when you want to blend colors on your paper and let them interact organically. You can see they kind of will push on one another a little bit. If I want them to blend a little bit more, you know, within each other, I will actually put the green on top of the blue and let that interaction happen. So pretty cool effect. It definitely gets that feel of water and liquid, which is pretty good. Next effect or technique is we're actually going to use a little bit of table salt. This is just iodized salt that you'd get from, you know, you'd use in a recipe. And I'm going to, let's see, I'll go with purple. And I'm going to go up here and just fill in this area. Now, I can tell already that my paint is very dark. So I'm going to lighten that up just by adding some more water. you can see I'm holding the brush pretty loose, like toward the end of it. I don't really need as much control right now. When I was doing the shapes, I was holding the brush more around the silver collar of the brush. It gives me much more control, but I don't need as much, so I shifted my hand back on the brush. So whatever works best for different techniques. All right, so now that I've got that pretty well, the paint's thinned out, there's some variation. I need to work quickly while it's still wet. I'm gonna take some salt and just gently pour it on. If you want to, you can just kind of pinch some salt in your fingers and do it that way as well. But the salt, you know, obviously does something cool. As it absorbs the water, it will also absorb some of the pigment and create a pretty neat texture effect. Okay, next one is we're going to do some drips and splatters. So I'm going to switch back to my round brush and I'm going to get a color. Maybe I'll do some orange. I'm going to do my drips and splatter over here. Now, this is fun, but you should always, you know, maintain control. You don't want to go crazy and start flicking paint everywhere. So I'm just gently tapping on top of my brush to do these tiny little drips. If it's not dripping, that means your paint is not wet enough. It's too thick. You could also tap the brush on top of your finger. That has another effect. Or you could get it wet, do it vertically, and just kind of tap the top or shake the brush down, and the drips can come off of the brush that way, okay? So that has a cool little splatter effect. Another way to do it, as I mentioned before, you can do this kind of wet on wet technique. So I'll get my paper wet first with just water down here at the bottom half. And I can go back into my orange again. And as you can see, when the drips fall on that water, it creates a really cool effect, you know, that it really splatters and gives that look. So maybe I'll do some similar colors, maybe try yellow. You could even physically tap the brush on. So let's say I get some of the red and I just want to control it even more. So I'm just going to actually tap the brush itself. You know, you could always do that. So those are some different ways to do some drips and splatter effects. All right, next one is a technique called sgraffito. And sgraffito sounds like scratching, and that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna use a paper clip or a push pin, something with a metal tip that's thin, and you can actually scratch into the surface of the paper. So I'm gonna do some different scratching things, just some simple lines, and see if I can do some shapes and whatnot. I'm pushing with some decent amount of pressure. It's not, you know, I don't want to like tear through the paper, but decent amount of pressure so this will actually show up. Now you can't see this right now, but I'm gonna switch back to my flat brush and pick a color. I think I'll go with, I'll try red again. So we wanna make sure that the red, we have a decent amount of water with this. And when I paint over this, what should happen, if you've done your lines into the paper deep enough, then the paint will actually fill in those lines and reveal, you know, the line work that you did into the paper, which is pretty cool. So you can start to see the different lines and things that I did, okay? So pretty cool stuff, right? It's a little bit dark in some areas, so maybe I'll try to kind of lighten it up a little bit, but that has some cool possibilities of things you can do. This last section, I want you to play and experiment and try things on your own. So combine some of these things that you've done. Okay, so for example, maybe I'm gonna do a little bit of the wet on wet and get this area wet first. And then maybe I'll kind of throw in, see some black. And then on top of the black, maybe I'll put do some salt as it's still really wet. See what happens there. Maybe got some different lines. You know, what happens if I do a line that starts in the dry space and then enters into the wet part of my paper. So you can explore with that idea, you know. Lots of different possibilities and things that you could do. I want you to practice. I want you to try things. Get familiar with the paint. See what it can and can't do. See what you like and don't like. The only way that you're going to get comfortable with it is by making mistakes and by trying things, right? So I hope that this tutorial has been somewhat helpful. I know I've had fun painting it. And obviously, if you have any questions at all along the way, please feel free to reach out and let me know. I'd be happy to help you in any way that I can. But for today, I think I'm done. All right, see you.